So, is Star Wars The Old Republic worth playing? Now, as anyone who's been watching my stream the last couple of weeks will know, I've been playing this again. I've been a very on and off player. I'm very much I always describe myself as a novice player. Technically, I was there at the start. I played the beta, but I've never played it for very long. I sort of go away and come back to it and so on. And what I want to do is I want to break this up into 3 parts. Now, I've sort of done this already for Elder Scrolls Online and Lord of the Rings Online. So I thought, well, I'm playing this again. Why not do this? The first part is I want to talk about what people's expectations were at launch, because I think that colours a lot of people's viewpoints now. When I sort of look at various people doing, should you play this game? One common criticism is, I mean, everyone's opinion is, of course, valid. You can't say no, someone's opinion isn't valid in terms of whether they think it's worth it or not. But there are some that are unfair. So I want to tackle that one first. Then I want to go over the MMO aspects of it. And then finally, the game itself. Now, in terms of where it was at the start, so I remember being in late beta, not very early on late, just simply because I'd advanced order. It was simple as that. I got the advanced order, which meant I got into the beta fairly late on. And it was enough for me that when it went live, I didn't want to play it. But that was, actually due to the strength. That is something I appreciate now. I sort of regret not playing it at launch in many ways. Even though every time I've come back to it, from my point of view and from what I want out of the game, it's actually got better. But I can understand from long-term and serious players of the game, it's actually got worse. So what you would do, of course, you'd go on the forums and everyone would be hyped. Of course, that's always one big downside to any game. The hype that comes with it. And things never really live up to the hype. And you'd never get more hype than when it comes to something to do with Star Wars, do you? But there was a common theme coming into it. I remember talking about, the sort of things that inevitably will come of it. And there was people going, no, it won't be like that at all. It won't be like that at all. I'm thinking, we're all in the beta here, lads and ladies. We know how it is. It's not suddenly going to change into a completely different game in the next few weeks. And it reminded me very much, actually, of Elder Scrolls Online. Another one where, I was very excited in the beta. And I actually did play that when it went live for a little bit. Stopped because it was such a, dog turd of a game when it went live. Completely turned around now. And again, there was a common theme there. And what a lot of people on the forums on the Elder Scrolls Online were thinking, they didn't want to play Elder Scrolls Online. What they wanted was Elder Scrolls 6. And this is not what it's going to be. And it's the same thing with Star Wars The Old Republic. It was quite clear that what a lot of people wanted was a sequel to Star Wars Galaxies. You can understand where they're coming from. I have not played Star Wars Galaxies, but I have known people, worked with people and so on, that did play it, and they always remember it with very fond affection. I never really came across a former player of Star Wars Galaxies that thought, you know what, it's a load of rubbish, really. I only played it because there's nothing else to do at the time. Everyone was very, very positive about it. So obviously with that declining and a new Star Wars MMO comes out, naturally those sort of players are going to be thinking, oh great, an updated version of Star Wars Galaxies. Who wouldn't want that? But this was never going to be that. And anyone who's, I remember, I've just watched recently actually someone's sort of review on it who was saying they played it in the beta. I'm thinking, if you played it in the beta, you could never have thought this is going to be like Star Wars Galaxies. You can't imagine a more opposite to a this is the ultimate theme park. This is a theme park amongst theme parks of MMOs. Completely different to that. But that's what you would get. And that's why I say, although if people are going to say whether it's good or not, everyone's opinion is valid, when you're going to attack it for not being the sequel to Star Wars Galaxies, that is unfair because it never billed itself as being. It never even hinted it was going to be. In fact, what it did say that it was a successor to was Knights of the Old Republic, which was another BioWare created game. And that sort of it was. And you sometimes see people saying, well, it's not even that really. And I think that's just being a bit church. I think that's those people who wanted it to be Star Wars Galaxies 2 that just want it to fail because it's not what they wanted. It clearly is the successor to Knights of the Old Republic. And what I mean by that is you don't need to have played Knights of the Old Republic to be able to play this game. You won't be lost at all. It'll explain everything you need to know. But your appreciation for the storylines is enhanced if you've played Knights of the Old Republic. In much the same way, if you've played World of Warcraft, you don't have to have played the Warcraft RTSs, but your appreciation is enhanced if you do. Elder Scrolls Online, I love Elder Scrolls Online. I've never played any of the Elder Scrolls games, but I can well imagine that my appreciation would be enhanced if I had. And it's that sort of thing. So it's clearly a successor to that. So from the criticism point of view, what I would say is there is valid criticism, and I'm going to throw a fair amount your way as well. But when people, if they're going to talk about it, and then if they ever mention the term Star Wars Galaxies, you instantly know, yeah, that's because you wanted it to be that instead. Now, in terms of the business model of it, for those who sort of don't know, like most MMO, it started off as a subscription model. It wanted to be a subscription model. In fact, it so desperately wanted to be a subscription model that they were saying very firmly, there is no way this is going free to play. Because people were talking, at the time it came out 6 years ago, free to play was becoming much more the norm, as opposed to the subscriber model. Generally speaking, what would happen is the games that went free to play would still have a subscription model alongside it, which would give you perks or something like that. But there'd be a free to play model. So they said, no, this is definitely subscriber. We don't want the free to play model. And it came out. And then it seemed, I wasn't playing at the time, but it didn't take very long at all. Within the first year, it went free to play. Now, I say free to play. It's not technically free to play. Because if you want access to the expansion stuff, realistically, what you need to do to unlock those, it's not like traditional free-to-play things where, we all know there's no such thing as free-to-play, really, because they can't support an MMO on nothing or goodwill. It needs to make money. It needs to encourage you to part with a few bucks at least. Usually the way they do that is you use an online store, and there is an online store, of course, and you unlock the content that you want. You pay a small amount, you unlock that content. That doesn't really happen there. So what you have to do is subscribe to unlock the content. But you only need to subscribe for a month and then you've got that content, even if your subscription then stops after that time. By the way, it's not easy to unsubscribe. That's actually a catch-all. EA, what are you playing at? It's not very easy to unsubscribe. It's not as simple as, I'd like to unsubscribe, please, as it should be. What I had to do, because when I got this computer, to begin with, Windows 10, I couldn't actually install the game onto it. It wouldn't have it. I did all the things, there was talking about, there was clashes with this program, stuff like that. Shut them all down, exit them all. No matter what I did, it wouldn't install it. Then all of a sudden, for reasons, I had to reinstall Windows 10 on this. Not for the first time, but all of a sudden it then allowed me to install it, which is why I've been able to play it again recently. But in the interim, I was thinking to myself, well, hang on a minute, I'm not going to carry on paying the subscription. I don't mind paying a subscription for a game that I'm not actively playing, but I might do at any time. But I'm not going to pay for it when I can't play it at all. So I tried to unsubscribe, wasn't having it. The only way I could find to actually unsubscribe was to delete my credit card details, like to physically just remove that as a payment option, which meant that the game had no way of taking any money from me. But it wasn't as simple as, I just want to unsubscribe, like it should be for all of them. I don't know what that's about. But anyway, never mind that. So that's the basic model of it. There is an online store with loads of stuff on it. Obviously, it does encourage you to buy cartel coins, which are the currency that you would use on that online store. If you have a subscription, then you get a certain number of those. There's certain aspects of the game, especially Endgame, that I think you don't really get access to without a subscription as well. So even though it sort of hasn't gone for full-on subscription mode, they clearly still want you to be a subscriber. They haven't really thought in great detail about the alternative model because it's very ramshackle. I really wouldn't want to play it on any of them. Mind you, to be fair, I don't like to play any game without the subscription anyway. But there are some games where they've clearly thought about it a lot more. So that's how the business model works. So in terms of it as an MMO, because it's MMORPG, and for this game they are two separate things. Now, as an MMO goes, it's got the usual trappings that you would expect of an MMO. You can group up. In fact, it gives you an experience bonus if you group up and do content with players. And it actually says, I don't know how much of a bonus it is, that the more people in your group, the bigger the bonus is, to encourage you to do that. Does it encourage people to do that? I don't think so, really. But it's got that facility. It's got guilds, it's got mail, it's got like an auction house type thing. It's got raids, which are called flashpoints. It's got raids, which they call operations. It's got PvP. It's got player housing, which is very common for MMOs. Looking at you, Blizzard. Decent customization of your armor. Now, this is something I think that they've developed over time, but it's pretty easy and there's a lot of scope, particularly if you're willing to spend a little bit, has to be said. But there is a lot of scope for customizing your gear and that of your companion. What's really good feature of it is when you're doing your solo stuff, that you have a companion who is invaluable. You notice when they've buggered off, which they won't do unless you tell them to, by the way. Because, you know, when you need healing, they'll heal you. At other times, they'll do crowd control and stuff and attack stuff. That's a really good system. And you can customize them as well. You don't really get to transmog, if you want to call it that, or, you know, wardrobe your weapon. You know, whatever weapon you're equipped with, that's what it will look like. But in terms of the armor, you can have different sets of that as well. So that's actually pretty good. You've got dyes in there as well, some of which are crafted, some you can get from various sources to help further customize your gear. So that's all pretty good. That is all really good as well. Different armors, different weapons, different mounts, different pets that you can get access to. There is quite a lot of customization, which I also think is really important in an MMO. Now, the questing, however, is completely, and I mean completely, on rails. The questing is very, very linear. It takes you from point A to point B to point C and so on. There is scaling in the game. So this thing that in the traditional MMO model where, you know, you go into an area, you do your quests, eventually you out-level them, especially if you use an experience boost or something. And the game does give you experience boost as well. When you finish like the main story arc on a world, which is like what you'd call a zone, you do get an experience token. It lasts. You can basically have an experience buff all the way through without buying any on the online store. And what it gives you is the three types of quests, shall we say. The first one is your main class quest. And this is a real strength of the game. That for each class, and there's 4 classes for the Republic and 4 classes for the Empire. And each one has its own unique storyline. It is very unique as well. Now, you run through that, and that's what makes it on rails. There is also, every world you go to, a story arc for that as well, a main story arc, which you should also complete. You don't have to, but you should. Then there are a few side quests. Now, there used to be a lot more of those side quests. They've basically gone now. They've completely removed almost all of them on most worlds. But you don't need them. In fact, I, for the first time ever, got a character to level cap, which is level 70 at the moment, which is my sniper, Imperial Agent Sniper, the other day, and I'm still on the first version's class quest. I haven't finished the class quest yet. I haven't got onto really any expansion content because I'm still at that point. But that's fine. I mean, that just shows you that you can just do those main quest lines, and that's more than enough to level you up, which is what the zone scaling is about. Because in reality, what will happen is you'll be like level 65 or something, and you'll be on a world that's intended for like level 45. Which is why it's important to have that scaling, because otherwise it won't work. The scaling is not there to allow you to just explore freely and go where you want. In theory, I suppose you could do that, but you wouldn't be following the class quest, and it's really important to do that. So it is very, very on rails. So from that point of view, as an MMO, it's not very good. The other thing is, when you're out in the world, do you see lots of other people? No, not really. And when you do, it's bloody annoying. If you've got a quest, and you always get a few of these, where you just have to go to a place and click on a thing, that is problematic for those other players in the area. Because when someone clicks on it, it disappears for everyone else. You have to wait for it to re-energize. Does it do that after a few seconds? Does it, El? It can take a long time. The worst situation I was in, now bear in mind this isn't usual. Usually I would just have to wait for half a minute maybe, if there's lots of people in the area. And there's very rarely lots of people in there. Most of the time, you can just imagine you're playing a single player game, for goodness sake. But there was one particular time where I just had to click an aerial. There wasn't anything else in the area I needed to do. It was the last thing I needed to do. And it took me 10 minutes. 10 minutes. So that aspect is also really bad. I always think it's bad in an MMO if when you do come across another player, that without grouping with them, you resent their presence. I don't think you should ever have to resent the presence of another player in an MMO. And you do. You do. It's pretty bad. You can agree to join up, of course, but very often you're at different points of something. You're soon going to diverge as well, particularly as you'll be on your class quest. If they're of a different class, and you know, you'll be disappearing from each other anyway. So it's very pointless grouping up unless you actually know someone personally as well. So the leveling experience as an MMO is actually virtually non-existent. The things you'd expect of an MMO. So what about Endgame? Well, I have not experienced Endgame. What do you have in Endgame MMOs? It tends to be defined around raids for the PvE content and PvP. Now, in terms of the raid content, operations as they're called in this game, I am informed by more than one person that it's not actually very good. Now, I can well believe this. I was trying to find a list of all the bosses that there are in the game, like all of them. There's not that many. In fact, it's a little under 40, I think, if I counted correctly. That is not much more than has been in World of Warcraft just in the past year. So, in 6 years, they've managed slightly more raid bosses than WoW has in the last year. Even given that there's been fairly substantial content droughts in WoW, I mean, over the last 6 years, WoW would have produced something like 3 or 4 times as many raid bosses. So you can definitely see that the raid scene will be a lot more limited. And when a new raid does come out, it's called an operation, it tends to just have round about 5 bosses. I think there was one with like 7 in it that I saw. But there's not many bosses in it either. Even given that, I mean, for all I know, they may, on the hardest mode, which is called Nightmare mode, they may well be stunningly difficult. I can well imagine it would be, because the other thing about the game is it tends to, well, it is fairly add-on unfriendly. It doesn't really like add-ons. You can't really use add-ons. As far as I know, you can't use them at all. You can't even have a simple damage meter, which, for all the negative things of damage meters, I wish you could, even if it just put one in the game itself, if we didn't want add-ons, third-party software. Because I have no idea of knowing whether I'm doing well or not. You know, it's very difficult for me to tell if I'm doing well or not. Now, there is a system of logs. You can log your performance and you can put that on a website. And I think there is some system of sort of looking at that live. But ultimately, it's a really difficult thing to... It was going to take a lot more analysis than you would normally. And realistically speaking, you are going to have to be taken under someone's wing, I would think, to actually, you know, because finding guides is not easy either. Most of the guides are not really well written at all. So there's that aspect of it as well. So let's say the raiding is stunningly difficult and it takes you about 3 times as long to kill a boss in Star Wars that it does in World of Warcraft or Elder Scrolls Online or something like that. Even then, you can see it's a very limited, you know. PvP, I'm told, is fun, but it's not really a PvP game. So I don't think there's a lot more thought gone into it. Like with Elder Scrolls Online, for example, you can clearly see there's a lot of development time and thought gone into the PvP. Not so much. It tends to be much more of a bolt-on for this game. So I can't imagine, although I can't speak for myself, I can't imagine that's going to keep people satisfied very long. So when people tell me that the end game is not that good, I believe them. And that basically means, as an MMO, it's a bit of a turnip. So is it a bad game? Actually, no, it's not. It's actually a really good game. And as I said at the start, every time I've come back to it, even though I don't play it for massive amount of time, maybe that'll change now, I think it's got better for what I want it for. Now, what I quite like about it is it's a very strong single-player role-playing game. A very worthy successor to Knights of the Old Republic. Brilliant, in fact. If this was a single-player game, I am sure people would be raving about it. I think people would think it was fantastic. It's just that it's not. It was intended as an MMO, and the developers, when they made their changes, seemed to lack the ambition to really go for it with the MMO aspect. What they launched didn't work, so they reinvented it more and more for the solo player. Whereas you contrast that with Elder Scrolls Online, what they brought out launched didn't work. They changed it and turned it around. It now has millions of people playing it. This one doesn't. Now, in terms of long-term future, Is it one of those that could disappear in a couple of years? I mean, I don't know. There are all sorts of doomsayers, no doubt, as well. Ultimately, though, you've got no knowledge about how many people play it. There's various people, I'm sure, that would be able to work out a rough guess, but I couldn't say which one of those would be coming up with a decent estimate and which ones are just plucking out stats and making 2 + 2 = 3 just to support their own argument. We know nothing about how much money it costs. We know nothing about how much it's bringing in. So you can guess that it would go on. It's profitable. It's surely profitable. It does have updated content. The content, as I say, that solo storyline stuff seems very, very good to me. And that is the main strength of it. It will no doubt keep rumbling on because there are MMOs still out and producing content and updating content with far fewer numbers. And they still carry on. So you can imagine the only thing that I imagine would pull the plug on it would be if it was considered that the same group of people that are developing this game could be more profitable on another project. So if that doesn't happen, then, I'd be perfectly happy to think that this will still go for some years to come. It's always a little bit dodgy, though. I mean, obviously, EA came in on it fairly early on, and then, I mean, it's not like it's a game, an independent game, or a game that's all in-house. It's a Star Wars game, which means they have to pay for the license to be able to do a Star Wars game. And if we're honest, if there is a more blood-sucking, parasitic company when it comes to popular science fiction fantasy franchises than EA, it's Disney. So that's not great news either. But it seems to be going strongly enough to keep going, but it's clearly not a success. But in terms of the game, if what you want is an MMO that you eventually want to do endgame in, and you want to do raids and stuff like that, and occupy your time in the way that you might expect an MMO to do, is this a good game? No, it's not. If, however, what you want is a strong single-player game, particularly one where you get to flash lightsabers around, then I think this is actually excellent. In terms of the gameplay, I mean, you have got those 8 different classes. That's something that's improved, by the way. There was a little oddity at the start. Although there's 8 different classes, you can almost say there's 16, because each of the class choices has 2 specializations, which you cannot switch between. They have like different specs as well, which you can switch between. But they also have 2 sort of main things that you that you choose between, but you can't switch between. Now, it always used to be the case that when the game first came out, and for a few years after, I think, you started off as one of the 4 characters. For example, take the Sith Warrior, which is the one I prefer. And then at level 10, or when you got to the fleet, you would choose what you wanted to be. You could be a Sith Marauder, which is just pure DPS, or you could be a Sith Juggernaut, which is like a tank, but can also DPS. Once you'd chosen that was it fixed. So it's almost like there's actually 2 classes within that same thing, but they both get the same storyline. So really what you're saying is there's like 16 classes, but there's 8 class storylines. But now you choose right from level 1, because you can imagine choosing at level 10 and then regretting it. It'd be a bit annoying having to start again. Well, this time if you regret it, you just start and you just choose it right from that start again. So that's okay. There are talent trees, but they're not like most other ones. As you level up, you get certain abilities. Every now and then you get to pick a talent, so to speak. They're not hugely inspiring, but I gather they can be quite important that you choose the right one. Again, if you're going to be doing that endgame stuff, I don't know that it makes that much difference if you're just doing the solo stuff. The solo stuff in terms of difficulty is stunningly simple. As long as you've got your companion out, all the content is really easy. Even elites are actually pretty easy. It's very difficult to die. You've actually got to be really... I have died a couple of times, I'll grant you. But that's not because I took on bits off more than I could chew. It's literally just because I either jumped off something, no bubble and fall, or in one particular case where I misunderstood what I had to do, and I had there's a group of people shooting at me, and I needed to destroy some vents, and I thought I need to destroy the vents because they were my friends, by the way. without killing them. And that killed me. In the end, I realised actually what I was supposed to do is just beat them, and then they kneel down and don't do anything, but they're still alive. And then I do the vents. Because that's the other thing as well, the choices you get. So when you're interacting with the quests and your own companions, there are certain choices. Most of them don't have any massive long-term effect. It sort of does with your companions, I gather. So depending on your choices of interacting with your companions, that can have some long-term effects. In terms of everything else, what you have to remember, you know, the main quest line is on rails. So although you can change things a little in the now, you don't really change the path you're going to take in the future. I'll give you an example. There's a particular quest, again, for the Sith Warrior on Alderaan. Remember, this is several thousand years before it gets blown up by the Death Star, so it's all fine. And you want some information from someone. And they're not very forthcoming with it. But they agree to give you the information if you'll help them out, because you've killed a load of their troops, basically. They were going to send their troops to shore up one of their defensive positions. That's now not going to happen, so they send you to go and help. And if you do that, you can go back and she'll give you the information you want. And you can agree to do that. You know, you can absolutely agree to do that and she'll give you the information. Or you can just start killing her friends until she gives you the information you want. And that's the sort of thing. So in the short term, yes, that changes what you're going to do in that microcosm, but it doesn't change the bigger picture. So you're not going to make choices that diverge where you end up going. Because as I say, that main quest line, that class quest line is very much on rails. You're always going to get to the same point at the end of it. And but it is very enjoyable. It is really enjoyable as a single player RPG. Maybe it's also enjoyable, you know, doing some of the flashpoints, just like the dungeons every now and then. Although I haven't played it since I've been back this time, but I did before. One thing I found quite disconcerting is it also has these story modes in them where you have to click options. Obviously, when you're in a group, it goes with the majority, whoever clicks the majority. The problem is, you can imagine people who are much more experienced with this, they click their response really quickly and off they go. And I'm there as a new player, and I've done this, going, right, okay, I'll choose that. And then you get out of the thing, and everyone else is they're off like a shot. And in an operation where it's all fairly linear, it's fine, you just catch up to them. There was one time I remember when they jumped down a shaft, they sort of, but I didn't know where they'd gone. They'd just bucketed off. It's like, what? Where have they gone? It took me some time to work out where they'd actually gone. So I think, you know, like with any game, when you're a new player, but other people have been doing that content for ages, they're just blasting through it, and you don't know what's going on. Fortunately, I've just been DPS, so I've not been absolutely instrumental in holding everyone up. In terms of the community, I can't really speak about that. I haven't really spent any time on the forums. And because since I've been back to it the last couple of weeks, I haven't really been grouping with anyone. I don't know what the community is like. I can only judge by general, but general chat is general chat. It's the same as everywhere else. And so maybe it's really good. Maybe it's not really good. Maybe it's really poisonous. I don't know. I don't know how forgiving people are. If you queue up to an operation, say, the operation members like the raid, there is a queue up system for that, a bit like LFR, I guess. Whether it's as easy as LFR, I don't know. Or LFR in WoW, I should say, because I've not experienced it. You know, but you're one of 8 players. It's not like you can hide in a group of 25. You're one of 8 players. You will have a job to do. If you pop up and say, by the way, I've only just been playing this game for a couple of weeks, what do I do? Whether you'll be given helpful advice or whether you'll just be told, oh my God, we're going to be dragging you around, and they just try and kick you straight away, I don't know. I can't speak for that. So that's my impressions of the game so far. As I say, for an MMO, it's absolutely terrible. But for a single-player RPG, a Star Wars RPG at that, particularly one based on the lore of the Old Republic, which is a big favourite of mine, I think it's fantastic. I think it's definitely worth a go. Remember, for the free-to-play aspect, I mean, you subscribe once, you get access to that expansion content. I really can't speak for what it's like if you just decide to subscribe for 1 month and then leave it at that. But, I mean, even a month, getting a month out of it. If you think about a single RPG, how much time do you really get out of it anyway? Usually, you get about a couple of months play out of it before you're on to the next thing anyway. So from that point of view, surely it's a lot cheaper than getting a single-player RPG if you're going to play it for a bit, for a couple of months. So I think it's worth it. I think it's worthwhile from that point of view. So I hope you found that useful and interesting. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share. And until next time, I'll see you later.